Our guest is Brandon Surratt, and if you've been around Anderson for any length of time, you know the name because it's forever entwined with Hyco, the Anderson County canine that was lost during his tenure with Anderson County. He died in the line of duty. A big dedication down at the courthouse. There is now an extra monument down there to remember these canines.
When I started following the Lord with all my heart, it was just like a clear voice that, you're not supposed to be in nursing school or radiology, which I thought I wanted to do radiology, and I tried that, and that I needed to be in law enforcement. And I was scared to death because, I was taking half the pay that I could have been making as a registered nurse or a radiology tech to go into law enforcement. So I was, I argued with God just for a few months. I was like, I'm not about to take this pay cut, And of course he won the argument, and I've been in law enforcement almost 14 years, and I have loved every minute of it.
Anybody in your family in law enforcement?
Nobody in my family's law enforcement. Wasn't before myself, and I'm the only one.
So it was divine intervention that led you, that there wasn't any reason that you pursued it other than that?
No other reason.
No TV show, no movie, no nothing?
Nope, no nothing. I started out in dispatch.
At?
Anderson County Sheriff's Office.
With what sheriff?
Sheriff Crenshaw. And I was underneath him for a year, and I applied to Anderson City underneath Martin Brown, Chief Brown. Mm-hmm. And Eddie Amon was over recruiting at the time, and he offered me an interview, but it was one of those things that I pursued the job so much because they wouldn't even give me an interview to start with. And I called Eddie twice a week. I'd call him. Sir, just checking in. Got any openings for interviews or anything like that? And then fortunately, he gave me a slot for an interview. From that point forward, I've just been hammered down for law enforcement.
So you went to the academy while at Anderson City?
Yes, sir.
You do the academy, you come back, and they put you on the road.
Yep.
Those first couple months or years on the road, being a city policeman for Anderson, what was that like?
Oh, it was great. When you first get in law enforcement, you have that just vibe that you want to save the community. You want to just do everything you can to save the community from the bad guys out there, and realize quickly that if you lock one up, another one's going to step up in his place. And all you can do at that point is just try to impact as many people as you can positive, just to try to say, hey, this isn't probably the way that you should live your life. And just because you don't ever know if this person is going to hear about Christ the last time when you come in contact with them. So I always, even up to now, I try to, ask them, hey, you go to church anywhere? Can I pray for you? I've been cussed out. I've had some that say I could pray for them, and right then and there, I'll stop what I'm doing and we'll pray. I'll hold their hand or their shoulder while they're in handcuffs and pray.
Once you're in law enforcement, then where did your interest at the city start to lead you?
Well, I wanted to have a little bit more room to police, and when Sheriff Skipper took over in Anderson County, I applied, got hired on a little over a year on patrol, and then a canine come available about a year after I'd been there. I actually went to their proactive unit.
Which is what?
Well, it was called the CATCH team, Criminal Apprehension Through Community Help. I went there, and while on that team, Hyco, his handler at the time, wanted to leave law enforcement, and so I was like, hey, I think I want to try this canine thing out. And I was I think there was two people that put in for it, and then by the time it came down to it, I was the only one that kept my name in the hat. I got him, and I was like, what am I going to do with this?
Because he was a what? Give us the particulars on Hyco.
I think he was 2 years old, a little over 2 years old when I got him. And he was a apprehension, tracking, and narcotic canine, which is what we call a dual purpose canine. And so I went through a 2-week course, which 2 weeks of saying, here's a dog, It's really short, and you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, because there's a lot of responsibilities and liabilities that come behind a dog. And at the time, I had no clue.
The biggest surprise in all that was what? I mean, you knew you would take him home,
Yes, sir.
but what about the other baggage that comes with having a dog in the house?
Well, you don't think about that till it gets there, and you know you have to integrate it. At the time, I kept him in the house, so I had to introduce him to my family. I was kind of worried about it, but Hyco was one of a kind. He had a switch that he could turn on and off. When we got home, his switch was off, and he was just like any house dog, you know, the protector of the house, and he just fit right in. And then once he got attached to the family, and of course we got attached to him, I mean, he was my best friend. He was the best partner you could ask for.
And when you got ready to go to work, did he know something was up?
Yeah, he would, if I went into the closet, he would come in there with me. And if I was putting on blue jeans or shorts, he would smell them. And if it wasn't the smell of the work pants, he'd just lay down on the floor like nothing was wrong. But if he smelled my work pants, he would smell them, go immediately to the back door, and he would sit at the back door and wait on me to finish getting ready. And my wife and kids would try to come up and pet him as I was getting ready, and he would just turn his head like, it's not family time now, it's work time. And he wouldn't have anything to do with them from that point forward. Even to the point where I'd put him in a car, and once he's in the car, they would come out there to kiss me bye, and as they were giving me a hug and a kiss outside the car, you would think he was wanting to come out of the car and protect me from whatever's going on, because he would just be barking and carrying on in the back of the car like they weren't family. And then of course we'd go do our work, and we'd come home, and as soon as I got home, he'd go in the house, and he was their best friend.
Our guest is Brandon Surratt. When we come back, he's going to tell us what happened the worst night he's had in law enforcement. Go back on the day in question and tell us about the call that you got about, I think it was a stolen car coming in from Townville.
It was called in as a carjacking at the Dollar General in Townville on Highway 24. And it was on a Wednesday, a training day, which we were all working. I said, hey, let's go see if we can find these guys. Sure enough, I saw them at Bilo. Well, a deputy Bolo that they had seen them on the bridge, the double bridges there coming across Lake Hartwell, and which was just before Bilo. And as soon as I got to Bilo, there they were. They saw me, the deputy was coming up behind them. They turned into the Bilo, and I was thinking, hey, they're going to stop, which is very rare for a carjacking suspect to just pull over. Well, I pulled down 187 to make sure that they didn't get out and head toward Georgia. Well, they came down, saw me, did a U-turn in the parking lot, went back out on the Highway 24, and then a chase started. We chased them probably about 2.5 minutes, over 100 miles an hour. They were in a little car, a little Nissan, and I think the brakes got too hot before they started to make a turn. So they hit a culvert, and which slowed them down, and immediately they all bailed out. And I'm thinking, all right, you know, they told us they were armed, and I'm thinking they're running toward an apartment complex, and on the other side of the apartment complex was New Prospect Elementary, which was in session. And I said, I can't let them get into the apartment complex, and I can't let them, you know, get to the school. They hit a kind of a power line clearing. I followed them down the power line clearing, because every law enforcement officer, he doesn't run unless he has to. So I was going to make sure that I didn't run until the very last minute. I jumped out, and as I jumped out, I let Hyco out of the door and sent him to apprehend one of them. Fortunately, he got the slowest one, and as he was engaged in him, I didn't know at the time he was engaged in him, because I'd lost sight. When we're trained that if you lose sight of your canine, you call him back to you. I tried to start calling him back to me. He wasn't coming. I was like, all right, well, either they've made it through the thicket, or he's apprehended one of them. So as I'm going through and I'm clearing to get to him, I finally see Hyco and he's biting one of them on the left arm. That's what he's supposed to do. That's good, right? Then I see the suspect. He's got a gun in his hand and he starts shooting at me. Then his third shot, he shoots down, or he points it at Hyco and he shoots him. Well, Hyco immediately released from him and came running back to me. And when he got to me, he laid down at my feet and it was just like a ton of bricks that fell. We get to the veterinarian at downtown Magnolia. I scoop him up out of the car, and as I get him out of the car, I run him in. They'd already told him that we were on the way, so they were waiting on us to get there. I ran him straight back, laid him on the table. They immediately started working him. And I'm praying the whole time, because this is the worst thing that could ever happen is lose your partner in the line of duty. And especially your best friend that you spend more time with than you do your own family, because he's with me when I'm at work, he's with me when I'm at home. Probably for about 45 minutes or so, they continued treating him, and then finally they realized that there was nothing else that they could do. He had already perished. And it was the most devastating news that anyone could ever hear. Some people say, hey, it's just a dog. Yeah, you're right. It's just a dog to you. But to somebody who has him as a partner, it's a partner and best friend who's been through a lot together over the last 6.5 years that I'd had him. It wasn't just the small things that we went through. It was the bonding phase to the, if I would go to the bathroom, he'd lay down at the bathroom door. So literally everywhere I went, he was with me.
When you finally had a chance to talk to the vet, what did they tell you killed Hyco? How did he die?
They did an autopsy. They sent him to Georgia for an autopsy. And I was told that when he shot him, the bullet went down, it hit a rib and ricocheted back and come out his heart and his lung and then exited out the side. And that's what I was told. That's what I've been told since day one.
Yeah.
But I've never looked at the autopsy, and I don't want to look at the autopsy because it's your best friend that you're trying to comb over the details on. So if somebody tells you, that's good enough. It's good enough for me.
The Fraternal Order of Police, Anderson County, and some other people came together to erect a monument to the canines that have fallen in the line of duty in Anderson County. We already have one for all the law enforcement guys. Now we got one for the canines. When you were told about that and then experiencing the ceremony that we recently had, what emotions were you feeling?
The emotions are it's very humbling to see the continued outpouring and support from the community with the Fraternal Order of Police to continue the support for fallen officers, deputies, state troopers, and also the four-legged friends, our canines. And any time that I'm downtown, I'm gonna have to go by and spend a little time there just because it's so special and near and dear to my heart.
And your family has also recognized Hyco in a special way. Tell me about what's at the house that reminds you of your best friend.
Well, when Hyco was killed, we had him cremated, and they turned the ashes over to my family and I after the ceremony that they had for him. And I was able to build a little monument in the corner of the living room, and I put his ashes there, so he's always going to be with me. I put his harness that he always wore. I've got his leash there. I've got his 2 toys there that sit there on this monument in the corner of the living room. So anytime that I can sit there and watch TV, I reflect on the things from Hyco. They were able to present my family and I with a painting from Miss Laureen, who's from Pennsylvania, and all she does is travel around giving these portraits to handlers across the country whose canines have perished in the line of duty. And she spent 138.5 hours on this painting. It literally looks like he's in person on the canvas. And she painted it. I can't tell you how many times that I touched the painting just to feel the hair that she was able to make be there. And now that's the last thing that we've put on the monument in my house in the corner. We actually have it at the very top of the monument.
The other thing that you and your family have been able to do, and real briefly as we close out, tell me about the foundation that you've been able to establish.
The foundation could not have been done without the community's help. The community has contributed money into the fund, and then the fund is able to give back to canines across the state of South Carolina. We started out at Anderson County Sheriff's Office and realized quickly we provided everything that they requested and needed at the time, and considering that I had been there for so long, I also knew what equipment that would benefit them. We were able to get them all that equipment, and there was still so much money left over. Well, now the continuation of people continue to donate, buying the stickers, the shirts, the hats, the 5K that we do every year. The money continues to come in. So with that money, we're able to give back across the state for the canines. Agencies request equipment on a letterhead that's signed by the chief, their captain, sheriff. It's sent in. There's a Hyco board. The board goes forth and votes on whatever equipment that they may need, and they've yet been able, they've fulfilled every request that's came in, all the way down to Charleston.
Pretty amazing.
It is phenomenal.
The dog you currently have, tell us a little bit about him as we close.
His name is Mac. He's 4.5-year-old German Shepherd, and he is completely the polar opposite from Hyco. He does not have a switch. It's always on. He always wants to go to work, so there's no similarity whatsoever.
But he's been a good dog.
Oh, he's been awesome. He's been good.
Our guest has been Brandon Surratt, who is now with the Greenville County Sheriff's Department, and who knows what the future may hold for him, but he's in law enforcement for life, and every time you think of Hyco, you think of Brandon. Thank you for sharing your story, Brandon, and as always, we want to thank each of you for tuning in and invite you to be back with us next week, same time, for our next edition of Conversations with Paul Brown. Until then, take care, everybody.